Did you guys know? Because yesterday I was talking about these ICE agents that are disgruntled, that aren't getting their health care, definitely not getting their $50,000 bonus because they didn't take it in a bribe like Tom Homan did. They're a little bit upset. They're frustrated. And maybe I was asking them, I said, when are you guys going to man up and maybe start, leaving? So this happened in Los Angeles.
My job. I just quit my job.
Yes! As an ICE agent?
My job. I just quit my job.
Yes! As an ICE agent?
Now, we're looking to take the word of some random woman who drives out of, this ICE facility where they're all inside planning their next murder. But she drove up, rolled down the window, and apparently these are activists and protesters standing out here, and they record many of these guys coming out as they have to leave that particular exit. And she pointed out that she just quit her job very happily. We don't know if it's true, but she's only one person. If she did, that's actually good for her. Let's continue taking down the entire system. But I asked for it to happen, and maybe it took this lady to be one of, and she announced it. Maybe others are quitting in mass numbers, and I don't even know about it because they're not announcing it on camera. I just wanted to, I guess, give a little bit of a John Iadarola type of optimism. One of them left. Now, by the way, go ahead, go back home. I'll need to hear more from you. Just, I'm glad you're leaving the organization for yourself, for your own soul. That doesn't mean that makes up for all, the terrorism that you took part in. You have to do a lot more work to come back from that. But I mean, it's a starting point. But still, things are starting to close in on this agency, specifically Department of Homeland Security and all their illegal activities when it comes to Border Patrol and ICE, because more Democrats are stepping forward and saying and doing more. Specifically, as I talked about earlier, the funding when it comes to DHS. Here's one representative. Let me get his name right. Raja Krishnamurthy. And he was talking about some of the devastating things that ICE has done, the murders that ICE has taken part in. Here's some details of what he's upset about and the reasons why they don't want to have they don't want to have anything more to do with funding this murderous terrorist organization.
The story of Mr. Silverio Villegas Gonzalez. Here's a picture of Mr. Silverio Villegas Gonzalez. Mr. Romanucci, he dropped his kids off at school one morning, and then ICE agents stopped his car. When he tried to drive away, the agents claimed that they, quote, feared for their lives and then shot him in the neck. Mr. Villegas tragically died of his injuries. Mr. Romanucci, videos from the scene do not show Mr. Villegas Gonzalez hitting or attacking the agents. You're not aware of any evidence to the contrary, right?
I am not aware of any of that.
DHS also claimed an agent was, quote, seriously injured, but body cam footage showed the agent in question said his injuries were, quote, nothing major. You're not aware of any evidence to the contrary, right?
I am not, and that is very typical of the cover stories that we hear and the false narratives in order to defend their actions.
There was no evidence. This is part of a pattern. As you know, Mr. Romanucci, Mr. Villegas Gonzalez was stopped and then he was shot dead. The nation knows the names of Renee Good and Alex Preti, but let us please not forget Mr. Silverio Villegas Gonzalez, a Chicagoan and a father of two, pictured here.
I love it from Representative Krishnamurthy. Make his name be remembered too. He was one of the first, at least the first on camera. Who knows how many they've murdered and we just don't hear about because there weren't enough people recording it at the time. But Representative Krishnamurthy is giving the case for Democrats and how they're increasingly, maybe slowly, but increasingly coming forward to maybe do something about all the atrocities that we continue to see. He gives another example in this same hearing where he focuses in on Greg Bovino. Yeah, Greg Bovino already left Minnesota, but did you know that Greg Bovino did all these other countless horrific illegal things?
Stoughton, in a ruling on DHS's excessive use of force, U.S. District Judge Sarah Ellis accused Greg Bovino, a commander in the Customs and Border Patrol, of quote unquote outright lying. That's what this poster shows, and that's what he did in a court of law, right? Yes. In fact, during his deposition, Mr. Bovino falsely claimed and lied that he was attacked before he deployed tear gas at peaceful protesters in Little Village in the Chicago area, correct?
Yes, he lied about being hit in the head with a rock prior to returning chemical munitions. That did not happen.
It did not happen. He also lied about something else. In court, he falsely claimed that he did not tackle a protester to the ground during a demonstration outside of Broadview's ICE facility. But here are the pictures of him doing just that. He lied, and he lied again. I've already called for Secretary Noem to be fired or impeached. Today, I'm calling for Greg Bovino to be fired. In addition, he must be investigated and held accountable for his actions, and I believe crimes in Chicago and across the country.
And nothing else should be done until these things are taken care of, until the criminals face some kind of charges. Greg Bovino is supposed to just ride off into the sunset, go back to California, and then retire with some kind of package, maybe a payoff system, so he doesn't continue to talk about how, he was given this authority to destroy people's lives. And speaking of that authority that he says he was given, did you know this, though, about Greg Bovino?
Gregory Bovino writing in recently revealed messages that he does not report to the head of CBP enforcement and removal operations, but directly to the Department of Homeland Security and Corey Lewandowski.
Wait, say what? Greg Bovino apparently put in some emails that he doesn't report to the head of the Border Protection, the agency that he's supposed to work for, but instead to Corey Lewandowski, the assistant to Kristi Noem, who cosplays all over the place. Corey Lewandowski, who's not in law enforcement. Corey Lewandowski, who's not an elected official. Corey Lewandowski, who's not an appointed, vetted official, but someone who just sits in the background and apparently gives people like Greg Bovino the authority to do all the horrific things that he was doing. That is before he runs away and gets to ride off with some kind of a package. The Daily Beast had some details as to what was in that letter and how it came together. Let me read that for you. So Greg Bovino lusted for a more heavy-handed approach to immigration in months before his foot soldiers started shooting people. That's what this leaked email has revealed. So Greg Bovino wasn't happy with the light touch that was happening. Whenever that light touch happened, he wasn't big on it because there was no bodies in the streets. Here's more. Their deaths, they're talking about Alex Preddy and Renee Good. Their deaths came after Bovino pushed back against guidance from the acting director of ICE to stick to targeted operations. The network of NBC News obtained an email apparently sent by Bovino to Department of Homeland Security leaders in the Capitol where he complained about the acting director of ICE, who's Todd Lyons. Todd Lyons is not a good guy, but apparently he didn't want Greg Bovino to be murdering people in the streets. And Greg Bovino said, well, F you, I'm looking to murder. I'm a Nazi. So in that note, sent months before federal agents shot those two folks in Minneapolis, Bovino complained that Lyons' preferred approach was too limp. Something that Greg Bovino is probably, very much accustomed to. He wanted Operation Midway Blitz in Chicago to be an all-encompassing sweep rather than targeted individuals who had committed crimes or were known to authorities prior, which it wasn't anyway. Here's a quote. Mr. Lyons seemed intent that CBP conduct targeted operations for at least 2 weeks before transitioning to full-scale immigration enforcement. That's what Greg Bovino wrote, and he was talking about how he doesn't like how this whole thing is going down. Here's the last quote from Bovino. He says, I declined his suggestion, and we ended the conversation shortly thereafter. Who knew that there was all this back and forth, this battling going on within CBP and Greg Bovino and his Nazi outfits? So this whole discussion and confrontation wrapped up with this email revealing this bizarre chain of command when Bovino said that he reported to Noam's aide, Corey Lewandowski. And he said, Mr. Lyons said he was in charge, and I corrected him, saying I report to Corey Lewandowski. So I guess Corey Lewandowski sided with Greg Bovino, sent him from Chicago where they were terrorizing people. Remember the canisters of tear gas they tossed at people when he said he didn't toss it at people? Remember he had his send-off in the middle of the streets of Chicago when he tossed a couple Heil Hitlers out when he was embarrassingly sent away? Apparently Todd Lyons and his horrible self won that battle, or maybe it was the courts and that one particular judge that kicked Greg Bovino out, and he was sent directly to Minnesota, where we see what has happened since. So because of all this that we're learning, and we saw a little bit about Representative Krishnamurthy, who's pointing out the horrible things that we're seeing. Democrats are starting to get a couple pieces of a backbone together, and they're now holding up potentially the government to continue to stay open after they averted one government shutdown that happened just recently, like for a day or two. There's potentially another one in the works because now Democrats have a couple few demands when it comes to DHS before they're willing to fund them more. Here's details. Jeffries and Schumer laid out 10 key demands from Democrats on this DHS funding, which includes calling for judicial warrants before agents can enter private property. Wow, so over the top. A ban on ICE wearing face masks, requiring the use of body cameras, and new laws for use of force standards. Now, they didn't get into details of what those new laws were for those use of force standards, but I would assume it's not, murdering people. Here's more. Furthermore, there are steps that the Trump administration has the power to take right now to show good faith, including ramping down the surge in Minnesota and removing Kristi Noem from her position. That's what both Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer wrote in that letter. And after they wrote, that list of demands that they would like before they go and fund DHS, which they shouldn't fund even if they agree to those things because it's still a terrorist organization on the American people. I feel like they must have been exhausted. Chuck Schumer and Hakeem were like, whew, oh, that's all we got all year. That backbone, that little bit of a pushback, these one simple list of demands that really tired us out. They finally had one thing that they say they're going to stand up for. So let's see if they stand up for it. But Senator Chris Coons, Democrat, he stepped on to CNBC and he talked to Joe Kernan. Joe Kernan is supposed to be talking about, things like finance and everything like that. And what Joe Kernan does not want is for there to be another government shutdown. So he had Chris Coons on and decided to berate him about this new Democratic position to not fund DHS and their willingness to hold up this government so that this won't continue.
Both caucuses, House and Senate, Democrats have laid out what I think are perfectly reasonable demands that your average American goes, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
But once again, you're using funding to get what policies that interest you, and it just is a bad
These
precedent.
aren't just policies that interest me. Joe, the idea that federal law enforcement
I know, but you're shutting down the government. You're shutting down the government.
I mean, it's the same rules that NYPD is following right there in Times Square right now.
When Republicans
do you see roving bands of NYPD?
Senator,
with masks and
you're putting up another red herring. You're shutting down the government because
it's how you do policing
you lost
in a
the
democracy.
election. You lost the election because you lost the election, which put you in the minority party. Doesn't give you the right to shut down the government to get what you want. Let me ask you this.
But it does mean I have to fight for the core values of our democracy, which includes supporting law enforcement that is accountable, that is transparent, but that doesn't murder American citizens in broad
When
daylight.
Republicans are in the minority, they have issues that they think that you disagree with. You don't want them shutting down the government.
Joe Kernan does not care that there's masked racists in the streets taking orders from Corey Lewandowski and Donald Trump and Stephen Miller because he wants his government open because apparently there's some kind of financial advantages that Joe Kernan can get from keeping the government open in the face of all of these atrocities for the American people. I mean, Chris Coons made a couple decent points, but maybe you should ask Joe Kernan directly. So, Joe, why do you like for children to be separated from their parents? Why are you okay with the murder of people in the middle of the streets? Why are you okay with women being snatched out of their cars and stomped in the middle of the streets and then taken into detention centers where they're denied any kind of medical treatment? Why do you like that stuff, Joe? Because that's the case that Joe Kernan was making. Which leads to this last exchange that they had, which may be even a little bit worse. Because Joe Kernan first was talking about how you guys lost an election. Hey, Republicans lose elections all the time. And afterwards, they hold up any progress. What did they do to Barack Obama and all of his potential judicial nominees? I remember that Mitch McConnell's bragging about how he held up all of them. Because Mitch McConnell doesn't care about whether or not he wins or loses elections. But now Democrats are supposed to care about that. But this was a big moment, I think. After all those other declarations and arguments failed, Joe Kernan went to this one.
Why? Because there are conspiracy theories why you'd let in 10 million undocumented Democrats.
They're not Democrats.
I'm kidding. I mean, I'm saying that that's the whole that And you don't want no ID voting. At the same time, you let in all these illegal.
I have to show an ID every time I vote in Delaware. Look.
You see what I'm saying. You see what I'm saying.
And
Democrats will never lose again if
is
left to their own
not
devices.
True, as you well know.
Look,
God help us.
Joe Kernan's pitching this great replacement theory that racists like to pitch. The conspiracy theory from these, MAGA conservatives. They like to say, look, they're admitting all of these brown people that are, of course, only going to vote for Democrats illegally because there's somehow mass election fraud that Donald Trump likes to keep saying is happening. I guess Joe Kernan also thinks the election was stolen in 2020 from Donald Trump because this is his pitch. This is what Donald Trump says all the time. So Joe Kernan, in his fight with Chris Coons to say he wants to keep the government open, is somehow pitching, you guys are admitting millions and millions of illegals that are going to be voting in elections, and that's your purpose. You see how he was a little bit embarrassed when Chris Coons said, what are you talking about? I feel like this must be one of those moments, when a couple of white guys are saying racist things and then they're not sure one of them is going to say it and the other one's not sure if the other one's on board or not. So he kind of tests the waters. I don't know. This is a thought I have in my head. I don't know how much this actually happens. And he's not sure if that white guy is also as racist as he is. So he's like, can I pitch this whole theory? Because those brown folks are rigging our elections against us good lily white people. Was that him testing the waters and he forgot he was on TV and he didn't realize that Chris Coons wasn't going to buy into it? Anyways, I hope these Democrats maybe find a way to continue to hold on to the bits and pieces of spine that they've put together, the collection of guts that they've got, and not let folks like Joe Kernan and them tell you that you're destroying the country by shutting the government down. Not funding Department of Homeland Security. And then Republicans not agreeing to normalcy in this country. And therefore, they don't get our money anymore. That's what they should stand up for.